Hi, everybody. Good to see you. I haven't received many questions, basically, because we sprung this one on you. And the springing is good. So I'll try and answer one from Pat Donahue. And the question is, well, it's basically an experience more than anything else. Lately, I've been aware of a strong flow of force through the hands. Most recently, it seems to be lighting up the thumbs, especially, to the point of waking up a couple of mornings where I was unable to flex the one thumb, whatever that thumb was, back. After I was able to calm down my reaction, I found wiping the hands helped, and also directing the palm of the other hand towards the stiff thumb. What centers are the hands related to, and are there any other exercises that would also help? Holy mackerel. Okay. I'll start in a kind of a way, generally speaking, so that you'll have an idea of what we're talking about. The whole idea about energy in a form is that there is no such thing as independence of the centers. The dilemma with all of that is that many traditional ways of looking at these centers is that they're separate from one another until they're linked together, and after they're linked together, they're very valuable in that energy moves through them, and you're superior or not superior based on that particular kind of a thing. Not to negate that concept, but to say it's entirely possible, and it seems very realistically real, that every center interacts with each other. Thank goodness that's true, rather than the theories that we try to come up with. Look, everybody is an energy being. I wish that was stenciled inside our brain, but more inside our experience. Our dilemma is that we engage mentally and emotionally with concepts so strongly that we hold ourselves from perceiving what's really there, and we do this consistently. It's the nature of the lower levels of engagement with consciousness. It is not a negative thing. It's tremendously normal to do that. If you live on the bottom floor, your floor of whatever level you engage with is superior and important, because basically that's where you live and that's what you believe. If you live on the top floor in the penthouse, you believe that, everybody on floor 55 is the greatest because that's the penthouse. You forget completely that the fire trucks can only go to the 8th floor, and who cares? By that time, the building's gone anyway and you fall down. So, well, we don't do it that way, but we do it kind of that way. If the crown center is on just a wee little bit, it feels like Niagara Falls is pouring in. Well, if Niagara Falls is pouring in from the view of the lower orientations, then that's really hard for the lower orientations to handle. Everybody complains about tremendous energy because, number one, we're on the lower planes. So higher planes interacting with lower planes, almost too hard to handle. Well, that's not good enough. We even arrange a step process where if energy is only coming in through certain centers, then you're not as able as energy coming in from upper centers. Well, in kind of a way, that's true in terms of ability, but ability to what? Ability to what is a good question. The primary principle of all engagement with centers is to prepare you to be able to handle energy flowing through you, not from you. So that causes a dilemma, because in every other part of our lives, energy or intensity or expression comes from us. Therefore, It's a torturous event that we have to go through to allow us not to be as important. Because if you're not important, you're nothing. Another false premise. Not real at all. However, in our world, our structural, social, cultural, functioning thing that we call our world, we have to feel comfortable with respect to being able or not able. We set up all kinds of levels of value. And it's important in the lower worlds. It makes us feel more secure or less secure depending on what you would like to be. More secure or less secure depending on how you were trained. Eventually, that becomes less and less. Eventually. But it's like Hercules doing the 12 labors to be able to allow that to occur in us because it changes us. Okay. So now you have energy pouring through a hand. It can, in fact, with ends of fingers, push to recirculate, and it recirculates. Every one of these small little knuckles, every one of them, is a small center, small little vibratory spinning thingy. And these things are entries where energy comes through into a form that we call personality. Personality is only a name that is related to the mixture of physical stuff, emotional responses and engagements with energy that we've trained. These certain emotions are right under these certain conditions. That's part of the personality's method of protecting itself. Next, the mental facility. Literally using mental stuff to validate and query into the world that we happen to exist in. That's all. We exist in a world. Our whole level of engagement with science, with all things not scientific, is to figure out what the world is made of and how come we're here, why we're here, what is this thing, and what are we? Decent questions. Tremendous philosophers and scientists, people all over the world have made up stories about this thing and also tried to really figure out as honest as possible just exactly what's there. What's lacked is perception. Therefore, we need tools to broaden out our capacity to perceive, understand, and make sense of the universe that we happen to live in. This is legitimate, tremendous. Add perception on the personal level. I'm sorry, there's just a slight little interruption here.
I don't know what happened, it just went back to...
Yeah, if you can hear me, hang on for a few seconds, and we're going to recalculate. Just pause for a few minutes.
Just want to start?
I guess. It looked like it slid over. Hey, Ron? Did it look
I
like
have
it
no idea.
slid?
Maybe there's too much intensity.
What about here?
Someone did it with their mind?
Nope, coming back
We
a
don't
little
want to
bit.
join one, we want to be one. It looks like it's still on. I don't know, what do you think, Dave?
Is it still? Is the computer still on upstairs?
Marlene,
Yes.
try and get it back without the...
I'm just trying to make sure that it's happening first so we know what to do.
I see. We have a dysfunctional computer, if you can still hear me. Great. Hopefully that's working.
It's on still.
It's on still? Great.
Yeah.
Okay, let me continue at a smaller scale here. The picture has gone smaller, and I'm not sure just exactly how to do that.
I think it's fine.
Okay.
I'll
So,
monitor though.
so we don't have a full picture. I'm looking at a smaller version. So So when we're dealing with ourselves as an energy form, we automatically are engaged with the form that we're dealing with. We don't make a separation automatically. By watching how we function, we intermittently pay attention to what we're doing in a negative scale or a positive scale. For example, sometimes people just say, oh, that's right. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's right at all. But the versioning, the intensity, the respect that you have for what you say, the pride you have in how you engage, is expressed with a force that implies, or a will that implies validity. Those listening, as you are to this, make decisions about whether that might be true or not for you in the version of personality that is expressing itself in a manner that relates to trying to understand the universe circa you, whatever level that happens to be on, based on the biases and beliefs that you have in relationship to yourself. If you don't believe those beliefs, somehow you are smaller. In fact, it's not true. Energy still maintains the same engagement, the same frequency, the same relationship that you've had before. But as a matter of fact, you are still a child you were when you were a kid, and you are broadened out in relationship to how you express it, but nonetheless, you still have those beliefs and little add-ons that you changed. Everything that you believe, decide to do, engage, positive or negative, is all part of the process of growth. For us, that's hard to believe since we're so adamant about how others should be in the process of growth. In fact, others should not be the way we think they are. They should be how they are and move quickly through that phase. You hear that part about moving quickly? Well, that is not a human trait necessarily. So, in some way, we review the circumstances almost automatically, reflexively, and we engage directly with adjustments that allow us to feel more comfortable in our own skin, or the energy that we have habitually been involved with, and use that energy to rigify or stiffen how a person should be. Well, okay, that's fine. Nothing you can do about that unless you begin to notice it. Perception is an exceedingly valuable thing. In the beginnings of becoming perceptive, there's a kind of a balance that goes on between how you think you should be and how you begin to notice you are. How you think you should be and how you begin to notice you are. As you begin to notice, you begin to look at and engage with, and if you are really looking at it, notice that this is the normal you. What can be wrong with the normal you? Nothing. But what can be adjusted in the normal you to broaden out the stiffness and make it thinner so more energy can flow through it and you can still watch it. So you are cultivating an area where watching, it's called perceiving, perception, watching is very valuable to you. Recognizing, understanding, and being willing to go beyond the place where you don't want to go beyond that little place that you're proud of. Being proud is not a negative thing. It can be used in many positive ways. Whether it be negative pride or positive pride just doesn't matter. Or in the middle, there's a big continuum out there. The dilemma is that a certain level of energy can operate through you for the purpose, here it is, of helping others. So, having said that, then you look back and say, if you're reasonably thinking, If my personality is an energy form, and it's constructed in a way based on how I thought life should be, or I think life was, then I'm going to basically hold on to that image as long as I can, because it suits how I am. Legitimate. But if you're consciously noticing that, that's really interesting. Because when you're consciously noticing that, there's an aspect of the mind, an aspect of the emotions, still related to mind, and the body, still related to mind, where you are looking at and beginning to reconsider your relationship with how you've unconsciously formed those energy patterns or structures that make you up. A very difficult thing, easy to listen to intellectually, not so easy to engage with, because confrontation comes to the fore. You have been trained to confront. As a parent, your parents taught you how to be a adult. Confrontation is of great value to you in relationship to others. But you haven't learned how to confront. Neither have I. Totally. 100%. It's, wow, a real dilemma. Okay. So Pat sees and notices kind of real stiffness. And she remembers probably that I asked you to do this, draw the hands down and pull the hands away, taking the focal point off of the activity between an end of a finger and the knuckles that make up the finger, so that more energy can operate through these systems and release and move through instead of release and move back and forth. It's very difficult because these things are hard to remember. More difficult to remember when you're consciously aware of them. Now, I'm getting to it, Pat. Take a while. So the issue is here. Wow, this is a real conglomerate of engagements with centers, energy centers that handle a little bit of energy right from the beginning so that you can cultivate a form and engage with these planes with that form. Called a personality. You've got to survive here. So this structure is at the physical, emotional, physical, mental level. And our hopes, wishes, and desires make it stronger and stronger and stronger, and our defense of these forms make it stronger and stronger and stronger. It becomes so reflex. You express yourself before you can even think. You may have noticed that from time to time. Emotions pop up before you can even think about them. Every now and then you catch one before you say something. And in doing that, what you've done is begun not to necessarily follow the habitual pattern of how you were initially stimulated to express yourself. Wow. This is cause for nervousness. Because if you shift and change, you're going to be nervous. You're going to think something's off. If you're used to being one way and begin to be another, if you're not disturbed by that, other people will be. So, who are you anyway? I don't remember you being that way. Good. The next stage is being okay with allowing yourself to reconsider a lot of things. You won't get it right even then. Right only means more thinning out, more broadening, so that more energy can pour through you for the betterment of yourself and others. There is no high level in this engagement. There's more capacity, and you are pulled by that flow to be helpful to others as well as yourself. Also, oh boy, here goes. You also open up a broader view of details that you do where you thought you didn't do something this way, you find out you do. Usually it's in the layers of deep level crevices of the construction of the early form, natural form. It's not negative. It's like a volcano goes up, it's all fluid, rolls down the mountain, and moves away from the hot spot. And suddenly it starts congealing. And it becomes more grounded, we often say. Well, the grounding part is that it's more like a staid way of engaging that validates the individual's personality, because the lava or the energy or the intensity is related to the value you place on your personality. I'm not implying that you should place no value on your personality before you don't, because you always will. You have to receive instruction from yourself about when you're hungry, when you have to go to the bathroom, just basic stuff. When you're rethinking something and you thought everything was the way, you thought you believed something in a certain way and find out you really don't. You've changed your process of thinking, not in a negative way, but you've broadened it out so it seems to be different than what it was before. You understand the dilemmas, the vulnerabilities of all forms that are enculturated, held in place by the way we think we need to be, enculturation in some way. No negativity. So when you open a hand, as simple as a hand opening, it affects every other center. When you perceive something different in you that you would like to hold on to just a little longer, everything in the personality becomes susceptible to an adjustment. Right down to the core level. Even it's just a tiny little drop of difference. There's an implication there that we have tremendous vulnerability to growth. Whoa! Stop it right away. Otherwise, you will endanger your concepts about how important you are. No fear of that. Don't worry. You'll endanger it a little bit, but you'll also notice the value that has been important all the way along in your growth. Every piece of that value has had its day. It's been valuable in itself. It is not negative. This is a very hard concept to get across. If you expand your perception, you tend to run the risk of engaging the way you did before in your assessment of what's changing and your assessment of how you were before. Not a valid relationship. Consider this just for a second. If you perceive how something has really not helped you in the last week or two, or year, or 6 years, or 10 years, try to perceive how it's helped you before that, so that you understand it had a place in the development of your personal way of engaging with the universe within and without. In the moments of your process of growth, this is really valuable to you. But you don't have to necessarily comply with the pride, negative or positive, that you have in having done something this way or that way. Brings up another subject. How vulnerable, then, should you allow yourself to be under the circumstances of broadening out your internal development or your perception. There's a whole series of beliefs around that one. For example, I'll give you one. Process of initiation, number one. Very key one in many belief systems. Oh, the belief systems themselves are let's say, how could I say that? Diverse in the details. But the implication of a movement, a jump in perception, so that you look back and see how you function and are uncomfortable with how you function. Also uncomfortable at the same time with the jump that you've just made. Don't worry about that. And here's the reason why. The effect on how you were is gradual. You will move into a space where you will be watching the personality form being prepared to handle more and more energy as it is increasing, because initiation is nothing but an increase in flow moving through you. And there is a tendency in initiation to move into a higher state and then shift into the lower state again and begin to shift and change it using not only the will, but a kind of compassion that exists in everybody in spite of what you think about others or yourself. An understanding. I used to call it almost conscience, but it's not like that exactly. Kind of a recognition of something internally being slightly off, but don't know what it is, and you learn how to wait and see, becoming more and more patient, because eventually it's shown to you as you broaden out your capacity to handle a little bit more energy. It is perceived by you. At that point, you may not notice it was shown to you from a higher level of mind, emotion, or a relationship with the physical construction of the personality itself, because it becomes like a mouthpiece. You speak through that personality, you engage through that personality. Therefore, the aspects of the personality, characteristics of it, must broaden out to be able to handle expression through it that is not necessarily currently your way of perceiving things. Broadens up the whole enchilada. That's because energy has moved through those centers differently than it did before. Simple statement. Very large engagement. The energy is moving through those centers differently than it was before. You fight like crazy to put the genie back in the bottle. That's normal. Try to be respectful to doing that, but not necessarily in agreement. Slow movement is exceedingly helpful. Very valuable. Even increasing the speed of movement, at least, let's say 10%, than what it's normal here on this plane, moves you through a lot of nervousness. That might be somebody calling with respect to sound or something. Maybe not. So, Pat, this is a universal question. One of the reasons I tried to get you to open those hands more, and this is for everybody, is if you open the hands, you can open them at a level that relates to the lowest common denominator and moves you towards the highest common denominator. It's really interesting. You begin to open the hands by doing those simple little exercises that by paying attention to the tip of the little finger, dropping your attention slowly down and around the bottom of the hand, up to the tip of the thumb, back down again, up here like this, continually being aware of the tips of the fingers one by one, then drawing your attention down to the middle of your hand. Open it up a bit, down to the middle of the hand, open it up again, doing this 2 or 3 times, and it stimulates the center that's there. Now, it also does something else. It's teaching you that it's true that energy follows thought, attention, or focus. Wait for a second. Think a moment. If it does that, then it moves through with an increasing point of reference and intensity to every thought you have in your personality, because the hand is similar. It's an energy form just like your personality is. Thought-provoking. Every time you have an emotional expression of some kind, the same thing occurs. Every time you have an intensity, physical tensing, same thing occurs. It is really valuable to be able to talk to your personality as if you're trying to help it yourself and try to soften it down, gentle it down, be kinder to it, slow it down. When you become really important and puffed up and fluttery like a chicken, like an eagle, immediately go to it and try to slow it down. It's really not that simple, because you will forget to do that. Wow, if an eagle spreads its wings, they're large, makes you feel terrific. Wow, good. No, what it does is concretizes, makes stiffer those tight ways of engaging from the beginning of your life, because you are vulnerable then, and you are watching like a hawk, an eagle, whatever, chicken, trying to duplicate everything that was there and making up ideas about that engagement all the time to structurally broaden out and make yourself feel more comforted and comfortable inside. This is not negative stuff. This is something that you learn that will be helpful for you. And you will be able to see through it a lot quicker than you could when you're 3 or 4 or 2 or 1 or 15 or 50 or whatever it is. Because you'll be looking at it and saying, wow, I am really more nervous. I'm nervous about that. Maybe I can talk to that flow and point it in the direction of asking it to be helpful, so that I have a little bit more gentleness and courage and try to handle it better. This is not so simple. Why would you ever talk to you when you already know how able you are? Yeah. Under a level of vulnerability in any state, no matter what it is, from tiddlywinks, not being able to hit something, to throwing a dart, to engaging with a personality that is dominant and a real pain to your vulnerability, is all difficult. Or engaging with learning something that is much different than anything else you've learned. Very difficult. Remember, the root center and the gonad center have their domicile lines in the thumb. The forefinger is related to the throat, or a will shifted into a different state, still engaged with the lower state of personalized will. The emotional disposition is related directly to the solar plexus and the middle finger. And I'm not doing this, I'm just doing this, sorry. This brow center is extremely important, ancient in its delivery and its understanding, but unfortunately forgotten. The heart center in this little finger is vital. And in the old traditions, this is not Spock, in the old traditions, what they did was realize that the emotional disposition was not as elevated as one would think. It was not yet had not yet attained a higher level of engagement. So it linked deeply with the throat center and the root and gonad center. Now, what does that mean? It means if you are able to link up the gonad and the root center towards the throat center, your emotional disposition must align to protect the individual growth of that will. The Hindus knew this a long time ago. The Buddhists knew it as well. The Hindus used these two fingers, the root and gonad center, towards the throat center to bring the attention up to this area, to shift the will from the personalized will to a little higher relationship with the importance of the need to grow spiritually. You must cultivate a will to go beyond the view of the personal because it stands in your way all the time. But nonetheless, it's what we are and what we have. So we have to help it to broaden out. Just broaden out, not negate, not disappear, not kill, as some people believe. But as you broaden it out, the will to think it's perfectly right begins to decimate, soften, not be as thoughtfully provoking to the self-interest, with respect to the self-interest, as it was before. So the emotion, in a kind of a way, has many levels as well. Think about this. If you remember, often there's a talk about bringing the solar plexus up to the heart center when you're under pressure, and then up and through the back of the head to the front. Now, when you're dealing with this, all of a sudden you begin to realize there is an activity, literally, because you're focusing on the little finger. Am I right? Hopefully. And you're drawing it down like so and like so, and you're building a framework here with the tips of the fingers that relate to the crown center. With the tips of the fingers that relate to the crown center. If the crown opens just a little bit, the links that help you to understand that the parcel of the personality and the higher levels are linked. They're not separate. Never have been separate. But we talk about it as separate until you gain access to a higher level, then you're high. They've never been separate. What happens is the heart center and the brow center start to link together early. Helps very much because the back of the head, if drawn out about a foot to a foot and a half, will begin to link with the throat center. And if you remember, the throat center and the brow are like brother and sister. They're really profoundly willing and able to link, because that forebrain, through tremendous focus in our 21st and 20th and 19th and 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th centuries, all of these centers, even in battles, the intensity to validate and win, has turned this interesting center onto the fact that there has to be a higher will engaged through a kind of understanding that is deeper than only the personalization of the individual. This is very hard for us to understand because everything is focused on the personalization of an individual. So, what happens is, this happens. See these fingers? Like this. There's a movement here between the heart and the brow, and a strong movement between the solar plexus, the forefinger, and the thumb. Because this, with a gap, energy jumps across really easy. And when it jumps across, there's an alignment that goes all the way from the root center right to the top of the head. That is the crown center. This is the crown center. These are the crown center. That's why this kind of a positioning is very valuable. The coupling of the hands, like this. Very valuable. what will happen if a connection occurs, you'll find your thumb sliding into a different direction. Because the hand begins to open, the fingers begin to open, and you'll find your intensity will follow this. And some of you who have been doing yoga a long period of time may find that this happens, and you have to pull it back to get it right and touch it. That's the personalization interfering with the flow of energy through the system for the purpose of broadening out and thinning the relationship between the importance of the individual and the energies, knowing the tremendous knowledge that energy has in a higher sequential manner to enable you to help you through that form. This is you. This is you from the butt of your buttocks to the top of your head. That's why the ancients used these hands, because they were easier to open. Many of you have a little bit of opening in these things, not hard to open. Just a little concentration over the years, and bingo, they will open very quickly. Dilemma is that the intensity of the self-protective nature in the thumbs, the dilemma of the self-protective nature in the thumbs, the root center, not negative, and the personalized will set up a little kind of an eddy, like you see in water running around a leaf or something in the road. A little eddy. And it will go like this. Not negative, just that's what it does. Relates to the whole system. If you're focused on the emotional dispositional aspects tremendously, you can look for stiffness in your fingers. It happens. I've had them. Everybody I know who's ever tried this system has had them. It's just the way it works. The dilemma is you've got to pull that through. And doing that, of course, affects your personality. Here's a dilemma. If you begin to have, it begins to be easier here, you will find your personality intensifying a bit. You want to get back into the groove. Intensity will get stronger in the hands. Natural, normal, nothing to be worried about, except it's trying to tell you something. It's like if you believed in soul, the soul is talking to you through energy movements, trying to say, are you getting this? And we look and say, I wonder what's wrong with my hands. It's getting a little, it's trying to tell you something. The dilemma is this language, this kind of language, cannot be engaged with until you have a little bit of perception. And with a lot of practice, you can begin to understand. It's not about reification of notes, information, positive, this must be right because of this reason and that reason. Not like that. This is the form that is growing. It is extended tremendously high into the reaches of tremendous spiritual engagement. It is so profoundly subtle and compassionate and loving that it will not affect this form unless it's ready for it in relationship to personality and ability and willingness to be okay with difference occurring, energy flowing through a little stronger. And this is not always easy for any of us to handle. Pat, terrific, wonderful. Not so much the numbness or the tenderness of the hands, not so much that. Wonderful that it's actually expressing and you're actually noticing. Most of the exercises that many of you know are tremendously powerful if the hands are open just a bit. They do not only affect the hands. The energies that increase in the hands affect every other aspect of your being that relates to You as a unit, you as a whole, you as a being of consciousness. You are a being of consciousness. That's what you are. And that's your secret. The obvious thing is you are also a personality. And, like myself, vulnerable and not perfect. So, I wish you well. Continue to do that exercise, Pat, the best you can, underneath if you can too. You need that because the solar plexus is really strong. Bring it up. And the root center is pretty strong. And we won't talk about any other center that's strong. Also, the crown center has come on. You've already started to be aware on your left-hand side to some degree. It makes your head itchy somehow. And you feel a little bit weird from time to time. Well, you are weird. So am I. So is everybody else. And the issue is there that you'll notice also the back of your neck is a little bit tender and a little down into the lower part between your shoulder blades. Not quite between the fully, but nonetheless in that area and in the cradle of your neck area. And this means you are growing. That whole cradle is very valuable in relationship to the throat center. And it's intensified by the reflex reactions that are there to survive like the rest of us. I wish you well in calming it down. Try to be calm. The more you're focused on it in a negative way, the more intensely the energy will flow in that direction, and just keep moving it off. Try to soften it all down. Wish you well. Nice talking to everybody. Glad to be back from a wonderful trip in India. India is still lovely to go, very dirty, and I brought some of it back in my sinuses, so I could share some of that with you. But nonetheless, I don't think that might be appropriate. But nonetheless, I could share it. I have a lot of Kleenex that I would like to get out of our garbage pail. And that is supposed to be a joke, but it's really sad. Take care, everybody. Wish you well. Bye for now.